So how do you protect your beautiful car from rust? Rust is a big issue in some of the parts of the country or some parts of the world where temperatures drop below freezing. In today's video, I'm going to share with you first what is rust, why does it start, what causes it, and then we're going to talk about ways you can easily yourself prevent rust. And if you're not going to do it yourself, you learn a lot about the products, the methods, the ways you can protect your car from rust and make it a long-lasting experience where you don't have issues. Let's get started. So what is rust and why do cars rust? There's something you need to know about rust. Only steel will rust, not aluminum. Aluminum will have that interesting appearance to it, but it won't corrode where it like loses its form and starts coming apart. Plastic obviously doesn't suffer from that. It's only steel that does that. And rust, in a kind of a scientific way, is oxidation. Basically, steel in the presence of oxygen and moisture will start that chemical reaction of oxidation and it'll start to corrode. Now, you will normally see that cars in the southern hemisphere, where you don't have snow, you don't have cold weather, they usually don't rust. Cars in the northern hemisphere will usually rust pretty badly. And people always wonder, well, why? What is the difference? Is it the snow that causes the rust? That's actually not the case, folks. Every car will rust, but how much is the question. And most modern cars in 2025, even for the last 15 years, all cars are coated from the factory with kind of rust protectants and whatnot for the normal rust that appears from a simple rain. You always have oxygen in the atmosphere. Simple rain will get the steel wet, and that's enough to actually start oxidation. But when the steel is coated, you're not going to have that. That's the idea here. But the reason cars from the northern hemisphere rust is actually not the snow itself, although in certain cases it may be, and we're going to go over it now. Snow is basically frozen water. It's just like rain. If you're not familiar with snow, it looks like it's frozen water. When the temperature goes above freezing, it just melts and turns into water. So that is not the reason cars rust. Although, here is the thing with snow. It piles up on the road. When you drive over it, it's going to splatter and kind of attach itself everywhere. Now, if you have an exposed piece of steel, oxygen is always there. You have this water just kind of sitting on it. As cars warm up, as things start to melt, you have a continuous supply of super high moisture. It could slightly accelerate rust if you have an exposed surface. That's the first thing. But cars in another hemisphere, in most states where we have heavy snow and very low temperatures, they use salt on the road. And the reason they use salt is it melts the ice. Because if you don't put salt, you basically have a ice skating ring with cars in it. Very dangerous. So they have to use salt to control that and not have ice all over the place. Because snow will fall. If you plaster snow and make it a very thin sheet, temperature drops below freezing, you're going to have just a sleet of ice. Just a sheet of ice that you can't break, and the car will just slide over it. Here's why salt rusts cars, though. Well, let's look at that. Well, we said moisture and oxygen. What does salt have to do with that? See, the mixture of salt and water, salt in this case acts as an accelerant, because we're not going to get too much into the science of it, but chemically, salt acts as an electrolyte. It will basically accelerate the oxidation process significantly. That's the problem. And the second problem is when they put salt on the roads, that salt eventually dissolves into the water, that now the ice that became water now. You drive over it, this is going to go everywhere. And it's going to literally, for lack of a better word, sandblast the bottom of your car. So all your steel surfaces that are coated, that coating will slowly start to getting chipped away until you have exposed steel. And there we go. You have water, you have oxygen, of course, in the environment. and you have an accelerant, it's going to start eating the car. There's no other way to describe it. It's going to start eating the steel out of the car until it completely turns into mush. But how do you prevent rust from happening to begin with? What do you do? I mean, do you just surrender? Well, let's talk about that. Well, let's talk about this scientifically, and then we're going to get into the, as they say, the meats and potatoes of it. How do you actually do it? So, what are we trying to do by protecting the car from rust? Theoretically, if you don't expose the car to oxygen or moisture or add an accelerant to it, you're going to automatically prevent rust. Well, unless you're going to take this car to the moon, you can't block it from oxygen to a point. And the moisture part, unless you move to a place that has no snow, no cold temperature, no rain whatsoever, then you're not going to have this problem. Well, that's not realistic. However, if you live in an area with normal rain, no freezing rain, no salt use, most modern cars for the last 15 years, the protecting that they have from the factory is sufficient to keep them going without issues. So you're not going to need to do anything to them. However, if you live in an area with salt use, this is when you're really going to be proactive. And the earlier you do it in the life of the car, the better. Here's what we're trying to do. We are trying to block one of the oxidation process. We're trying to block one of the components or multiple from causing the oxidation. We're going to try to block the oxygen. We're going to try to block the moisture. That's the sure way to protect this car. However, there is no magic fix. This is something I need you to understand. This is an involved process. It involves not the amount of work you're going to put into it, follow-ups. Because just like the original coatings on the car, as you drive it, it's going to get hit by the salt and the sleet and the snow and all this stuff, and it's going to wash it off and scratch it and do stuff to it and start the oxidation. Same thing is going to happen to whatever procedure you do to block the oxygen and the moisture, because that's what the car had from the factory. So following up on it is very important. That's all we're trying to do. You're trying to block the oxygen. You're trying to block the moisture because you can't change it from being in the environment. That's what we're trying to do. So what do you do? How do you protect this car that you just spent a small fortune buying from rusting away? Let's talk about the products first, because we already talked about how we're trying to block the moisture and oxygen. Let's talk about some products, and before we get into actually what are we trying to do and how are we going to apply it, both DIY or what the professional is going to do. So there are multiple types of rust protection. I mean, essays have been written. Debates has never ended on this. So I'm going to share with you my humble opinion. From my personal experience, from what I see from other cars, that works. Prevention is key. Applying the product too late, it's too late. Oxidation already started, and it's going to be very difficult to contain it. The earlier you apply any kind of protection on the car in its life, the better the effect of it will be long term. Now, what product do you use and what's the best one? There is no such thing. Every product you're going to use will have advantages, disadvantages. Let's talk about a few that I see them very popular in our area. There are products that are temporary, and I call them controlled products, which are more DIY friendly. And then there are products that are similar to what the factory uses, or permanent products. I usually don't like the permanent products because basically if you take the bottom of this car and paint the whole thing top to bottom, that's basically what the permanent solution is. Well, when you paint the bottom of it, are you going to be able to remove it? See what's behind it? You can't. And if you have a pinhole and moisture and oxygen were able to get through this pinhole that you can't see, well, you just made it worse. You made it so bad that moisture and oxygen will get behind the paint that you just put and start the oxidation process, and by the time you find out, it's already completely rusted. That's the problem. I'm going to talk about a few products. One of them is very popular in the truck community because trucks with frames are the #1 victim of bad rust. Every other car, they've gotten better, they're covered, everything is better, but trucks are the biggest problem with the frame, whether it's exposed like that. One product you can hear about is PR15. Excellent product. The truth have to be said. There's a company called Z-Bar that I'm not sure if they use PR15 or something similar, but they have permanent applications. Look, the products themselves, they're excellent. They're actually meant for this. This is a version of what the OEM manufacturers do to the frames before they even go into the car. However, unless you're just talking about this GX or this LX, they both are body and frame. Unless you disassemble the entire car, take that frame, dip it completely in that every 2-3 years, there is a danger with these products. Because you can only coat what you can see or we can access. What about the inside of the frame? What about areas on top of the frame that you can't access? How do you completely and absolutely coat this frame 100%, not even a pinhole? Can you do that? Short of taking the frame and dunking it in a bath of that product, you can't. That's the problem. This is why I actually dislike these products, because no matter how much good you apply them, how much attention you pay, you're gonna leave a pinhole. You're gonna leave an area uncovered. And all it takes for moisture and oxygen is to get behind that coating and start eating away at the frame. And now we have rust. And the worst part is, now you can't see it. Because when rust starts, you're going to have a small surface rust area. And if you leave it with time, it's going to grow. But in this case, it's going to go behind the coating and it starts to basically eat it away. So application is key. And usually these products, not DIY friendly. They're harsh chemicals. They have a long dry time, specific applications. So usually this is the professional products. However, lately, we have a magical product that is just one of the best things to do because they're very DIY friendly, non-toxic, they work very well, and the best part is they're removable very easily. That's the best part. Two of these products, many debates on these two, but let's talk about them. Fluid Film and Surface Shield by Blaster. They're both excellent in my opinion, and actually this is my own personal car. I have Surface Shield on this one just to try it out. We're going on year 3 here. Here's my feedback on the both. Fluid Film, excellent. To me, it's still the best. The only thing with Fluid Film is it's messy, and if you service the car, it's a giant mess. Because Fluid Film and Surface Shield at the same time, they have something in common. They both contain lanolin. Lanolin is a non-toxic, kind of friendly to the humans that are applying it. That's why it's sold as DIY product. What that lanolin does, it doesn't do any magic. It just plays a chemical trick. It's a water repellent. You can actually use it for other stuff that you want to repel water from. So wait a second. We don't care about oxygen anymore. We care about water. We are repelling water. Now you're repelling the moisture. Therefore, you don't have rust anymore. And the best part about these two is you can apply them anywhere. They're very simple. They come in a can. You can really get them in areas that you can't reach otherwise. You can spray them on bolts. Because if you spray something as permanent, like undercoating, well, you can't take that bolt anymore because now it just has a glob of stuff on it that is dry, hard, and it's there. While Fluid Film and Surface Shield, for the most part, you can do that. You can really find the kind of fine tune where you want it. And that's what makes it good. However, there's a big difference between Fluid Film and Surface Shield. Fluid Film, very archaic in a good way. It is a film, you apply it, it repels water. As you drive and as debris and stuff hits it, it's gonna wash off, for lack of a better word. Surface Shield, it does the same thing. It also has lanolin, does the same thing. But as it wears off, it leaves a coating. You could still wipe it off, but it's a little bit of a harder coating as a secondary backup. There's good and bad in both. The good is, Surface Shield tends to last longer. But at the same time, if you don't apply it properly, you could arrive at the same problem of moisture getting behind it as the lanolin washes off. So the key thing with these two products, you don't apply them once and forget about them. You gotta keep applying them. With fluid film, it washes off much faster than Surface Shield. Either one of them, apply it and reapply it and touch it up and watch it. This is the most important thing is you need to be involved in the process. That's why I actually recommend it as a DIY process. You can have a professional do the initial application and you DIY the touch-ups. Maybe every year you want to do touch-ups, every 2 years, 3 years max, you need to reapply it. You'll never have rust because this stuff works. This stuff works super well. Hybrids, the biggest one. This is the number one question I get. Should you undercoat hybrid cars? And why some manufacturers discourage it, why some undercoating companies say, no, we won't cover hybrids or dealerships or whatnot. Why that is. Let's talk about that. I don't see a problem coating a hybrid car with the understanding of what we are coating. And like we talked about, this is very important. Here is the problem with hybrids or electric cars even. And coatings. See, let's take fluid film for example. The problem with fluid film, you spray it on non-oil resistant rubber, it's gonna swell that rubber. Hybrids, they have high voltage cables running underneath them. Electric cars, they have a battery underneath and they have a high voltage cable running underneath it. Some of the fittings and ends of that cable, they are non-oil resistant rubber. Not the whole thing. Plastic. Plastic's fine. Synthetic rubber is fine. But some of it has non-oil resistant rubber. You spray it on it, you could swell that, and that could be a protector from rust or protector from like an insulator, and now it swells and it could let water and all kinds of stuff and start causing issues. That's the only problem with hybrids, electric cars, and rust proofing. However, if we don't go heavy-handed on everything and just not care, we're gonna be okay. Basically, wherever you see rubber, don't spray it there. Simple as that. That's why I like fluid film, because you have a tiny little can. You can really direct it exactly where you want it. If you see orange wires, cover them up. Don't spray that directly at them. As simple as that. That's the only reason folks don't like to coat hybrids, because it takes more work. But I don't understand why they don't charge more. Hey, we got to cover all these orange wires so we wouldn't damage them. That's going to cause more work, which means it's going to cost more. And that's fine. That's fair. But not coating hybrids, period, is not, if you really look at it, doesn't harm the car. It's the same thing. You just have the orange cables. Just protect them and we're good. So how do you apply it yourself? This is actually all you need to do this yourself. You need a couple ramps. Drive your car on it in the front. You need the fluid film or Surface Shield or whichever, I hope, one of these two products, because the other stuff is not DIY friendly. Get yourself some safety glasses. If you really want to go to the next level, you got a date at night and you don't want to get covered with the stuff, get yourself some face shields. The most important thing is you work outside, not inside your garage. You want to wear that one long sleeve shirt that is going to be converted to a rag afterwards, and one pant that you don't like, because this stuff goes everywhere and it's going to cover everything. The good thing is it's not toxic. Doesn't really harm your skin. Obviously, don't spray it at your hand. Go wash up afterwards very well. But you drive your car on the ramps in the front, coat away. And we're going to lift this car up in a bit. I'll show you what we are doing, what we are not doing. Lift the front, do the front, reverse your car, lift the back, do the back, repeat every year. As simple as that. Let's put this car on the lift. Let's talk about actually what to do and what not to do. Let's talk about the plan here. First, if you have any covers, remove them. Covers that are removable covers, not like the cover in the fuel tank. This one, leave it. The next thing is If you have a spare tire like this, bring it down. In the case of unibody cars, if you really want to go overboard and go to the next level, if you have any big plastic covers, remove them. Here's what we're gonna do, and here's what we're not gonna do. Let's start with what we're not gonna do. First, this is something very important. You don't wanna spray removable or separate objects. For example, this is my personal car right here. Mrs. Car Care and I have been off-roading with it. Do you notice this I didn't coat? This is a removable piece. This is something I don't want every time we do an oil change, I get covered with the stuff. If this rots in 15 years, I can just go buy a new one. Not the end of the world. Same thing with this one. Not worried about it. And if you have more covers, we're not worried about it. That's the first thing. I wouldn't cover, but that's your call. Second thing is, do not spray undercoating of any type on the transmission, body itself, even the pan, or the engine. This gets super hot, that gets super hot. You're just gonna cook the coating away and you're gonna smell it and it's gonna smell horrible. For what? Most engines these days are aluminum, you're not protecting anything. You're just wasting product, wasting your time, and then dealing with the smell and the consequences. Second thing, suspension. You wanna spray it here, but don't go spraying it on bushings. Remember, we talked about the rubber. Don't go spraying it directly on bushings. That's not a good idea. You wanna spray it, for example, on the strut. That's fine. On the knuckle itself, that's fine. If your knuckle is aluminum, don't spray it. Aluminum will not corrode like steel. This is very important that we remember that. And the other thing that is very important, please don't spray it on exhaust. I know exhaust does deteriorate with time, but there's nothing you can do for the exhaust. That's one sacrifice from rust. There's nothing you can do. Anything you spray on it, it's just gonna come apart. There's some high temperature paint that you can do it. Folks, unless you take the piece, dunk it in that paint, you're never gonna get full coverage. There's no way. That's the bottom line. So if you're worried about exhaust, fortunately, that's something you're gonna have to sacrifice. In a body of frame truck like this, my main concern is the frame. Now this particular frame, just for you to get an idea, has been coated with surface shield over 2 years ago. And we intentionally left it and didn't touch it up this particular winter because I wanted to see how it holds. Watch how it's holding. It's completely washed off here, but it left this, like when I wipe it down, you see it. It left the coating on. Didn't completely like wash off. But if you look in an area like here, it's actually still there. See how it's shiny? It's still here, not just the coating it left. But then when you look at areas like I was looking earlier, like right here, it has completely washed off on this edge. So we need to touch that up. So the ideal time to undercoat your car is either going out of winter or going into winter. Ideally before winter, fall time. As the temperatures start to come down, not too cold, where you can do it yourself, that's the best time. There is absolutely no point in coating your car if you're going into summer because you're not going to do anything. So really the best time is before winter. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to keep it super simple. Fluid film, just going to give you a small demo. The area that I wiped off right here, let's shake our can. That's it. That's protected. We're done. You're basically gonna do that for the entire frame, front to back. Simple as that. It's very time consuming, and the first application a lot harder than the subsequent applications, because here I don't have to apply it everywhere. I only have to apply it to the areas that are washed off. Now we're gonna need to touch this one up. We're gonna do it before fall. But that's really what you need to do. Now, fluid film will have a very distinct smell. Smells super harmful, super toxic. It is not, folks. Obviously, work in a well-ventilated area, like outside, is preferable. But it's not something that's going to be harmful. You need to wear a respirator or anything. You don't really need to do that. Here's the next thing on trucks that you want to coat. If you have this style rear end, like I say, if it's not just a Toyota, if another model, if you have this style rear end, this is a steel housing and a steel differential. You want to coat these, but don't get carried away around the edge here because you have a seal there. You want to coat these because these are steel. But if you have a different style, aluminum and 2 axles coming out of it, you'd be wasting your time and your precious fluid film. It makes no sense to cover that. You want to cover the frame in its entirety. You ideally will want to get an attachment that has a hose, or they sell kits that you can pour the fluid in it, pressurize it, and then you have a nozzle tip where you can get it in places. Because remember, we're trying to block oxygen and moisture. In this case, we're trying to repel the water from sticking to the surface and start the oxidation. So you want to coat the surfaces you see and the surfaces you cannot see on top of the frame. If you want to take it to the next level, you're gonna see the openings of the frame. There's a lot of openings all over the frame. Take it and try to spray the inside as well. Now, you can only do so much. Like for example, this section in trucks is very tricky to get to because you can take these caps, but there's a caps on the frame. If you look right here, there's this cap, for example, but you have to have a very long nozzle that goes all the way to here, or you can try to get in from here. This is where it gets tricky. But remember, if you can't access it with a nozzle, do you think water will be able to access it? That's what you want to think about. Now, some folks will say, well, why don't I just cover all the holes 100% and I don't have to worry about the inside? You can never cover the holes out of the frame because you cover everything you see. What about the stuff on top? Because water will splash here and go everywhere. And the worst thing you can do is, and this is important, the worst thing you can do is trap the water inside. Cover all the drains and leave the top open. Water will come in, have nowhere to go, it's just going to sit there. Water and salt is going to completely destroy the frame from the inside out. That's the problem. And if you want to take it even to the next level, I mean, I am keeping this car for the rest of my life type deal. You're doing it yourself. Before you coat the car, fall time, choose a few days that are dry, preferably a Saturday, Sunday project. Saturday, wake up in the morning, get a small pressure washer. It doesn't need to be something fancy. You can buy one for $100 from the hardware store. Doesn't need to be high pressure. Wash the entire frame. I mean, I'm talking wash any dirt, any salt that is left over. For example, you look here, we got some salt residue sticking around here. Just wash the whole thing completely. Let it dry. And ideally, when you let it dry, leave fans on it. Because if you get water inside, you just trapped it when you spray the stuff on top of it. You want to dry it up completely. Ideally, the real professionals will use a heated dryer to blow inside the frame to dry it up completely before they start. Because this surface, it will have some moisture, surface moisture on it. If you put a heat source on it, it can actually dry it up. That's ideal, but now we're talking about the next level of things. But you want to wash it. You don't want to trap that salt in and the moisture in. You want to clean it up. Spray the whole thing. Main thing you want to spray, brake lines. See, in the case of Toyota, this line is coated. I'm not worried about this, but do you see this small section of line, how it's not coated? That's what you want to spray. And on the case of Toyota and Lexus trucks, you come in the back here, you'll have the lines, brake lines running right here. The tip of them is not coated. You do want to coat that. You see how this one is not exposed steel, that's actually coated. You want to coat the ends because that is very important. Don't coat fuel tanks on modern cars, folks, because this is plastic. This is like a composite of plastic. We're not worried about it. But the shield for the fuel tank and the straps, you don't want to coat. Like this strap is steel. You do want to coat it. But there's no reason to coat the tank. It's plastic. This is, you use your common sense and the information you learned from this video and 10 other videos that I hope you're going to watch as well to educate yourself even more. Use that to coat your car. But it doesn't end there. You coated your car this year. We're happy, you're protected. Next year, you touched it up. But there's things in between that you can actually do to really take it to the next level. Look, if you're against car washes, automatic car washes, and you live in the northern hemisphere, just don't drive your car in the winter. That's all I'll tell you. Because you need to blast underneath this car to wash the salt off. And the only way to do that is to go through an automatic car wash that has an undercarriage blast. If you do that every time the temperature goes above freezing, or you have a garage that stays above freezing or it's heated, do that very frequently. Every time there's a snowfall, go take it and then take it a second time. Wash all the salt off. Because even with your best effort in application, you still maybe miss a small spot. And if you leave that salt lingering there, it's going to start it. But if you continuously wash the underneath, wash the underneath, wash the underneath, and maybe at the end of the season, instead of coating the whole frame, take that pressure washer, wash the whole frame, wash the whole underneath. Whether it's a truck, if it's a car, just wash underneath it, maybe take the covers down, wash everything behind it in case. We're done at that point. We don't have any issues anymore. And then coat it in the fall. This is not a difficult process, but it's a very time-consuming process, and you can easily get carried away with it and kind of go overboard, but you can't go overboard here. Just don't spray the exhaust. Don't spray hot parts. Don't spray rotating parts. Like this axle, there's no point in spraying it, because all you're going to do is, see, we have some overspray. It's just going to splatter it everywhere. We're not talking if you get a dot on it, we have a problem. Obviously, this rubber is oil resistant on the CV boot, folks, because on the other side, there's oil. So we're not worried about the CV boots here. But you want to apply it where you need. Some will overspray here, overspray there, that's okay. But we don't want to be liberal and just go over the aluminum just to coat it. Doesn't make sense. That's not going to protect the car. The last thing you want to avoid is connectors. Don't go directly spraying at connectors. They're going to come in your way. You may, like you're spraying here, some of it got here. That's okay. But don't go spraying a connector. It's plastic, and it does have rubber seals. You see these little green seals right here? These are rubber, and this is not oil resistance, folks. So don't be spraying directly on connectors. That's one thing that is important. In the case of hybrids, cover up the orange wire. Use tape, use some tarp, put the tarp, spray around it lightly, spray around it, don't spray directly on it. That's all you need to do with hybrids. Otherwise, hybrid is a normal car. There's nothing to it. Batteries inside the car, most hybrids. If the battery's outside, don't spray it heavily. There's no need. Most of these hybrid casings, the battery casings, there's aluminum or reinforced steel and coated. We're not worried about that. We're worried about the body, because even the battery inside, it's a replaceable part, the cover for it. So there is that. If you don't have a truck, you have a normal car. It's a Toyota Camry, Toyota Highlander, any Lexus RX 350, any other model, not a body and frame truck. Should you coat it? Here's what we have gotten to in 2025, or really the last 10 years. Most new cars have so many coverings underneath them, you hardly even see sheet metal anymore. I'm not worried about coating replaceable components. In a non-body or frame car, what you're worried about is the unibody. That's the only thing you can't replace. I mean, if you replace unibody, might as well go buy another car. We're not worried about suspension components. Well, by the time they rust enough where they're an issue, they're likely going to be worn down, you're going to replace them. We're not worried about subframes either. We're not worried about movable components of the suspension that are replaceable separate. We're worried about the unibody. That's the one thing we are trying to protect. Coat the unibody wherever you can see. Use common sense here. If the panels are completely covered where you can't even see it, there's not even an access to it, it doesn't become as important to coat them because they're not exposed to the elements anymore. Whenever you see an opening, that's where you want to coat. Wherever you see exposed steel, that's where you want to coat. And the number one spots you want to coat is spots that will collect water, usually at the edges of the wheel well. That's when things will rust. You want to coat them from the inside. Although modern cars have gotten so good at not leaving these pockets. Whenever you see a pocket, water and salt will collect there. Tiny little rock hits a place, which is normal from driving. That thing is going to start corroding. If you coat that though, we're going to protect it. And that's the reality. We don't need to get carried away with it. We just need to use common sense. If I am salt, water, and oxygen, do I have direct access to this component? If you don't, then you don't need to coat it. Frames on body and frame trucks, it's literally a giant slab of metal sticking out from underneath the body, ready to receive all the three. So you might want to coat these. And in body and frame trucks, it's more important to coat the frame than the body. Same thing applies, because the frame covers part of the body. We're usually not worried about the body because, believe it or not, this is going to sound interesting, the body is a removable object. In a pickup truck, the bed is a removable object. The frame is not. That's how you want to think about it. You can still coat the body, coat like the cab if it's a pickup truck, or the body itself. But the main thing is the frame. That's what you do not want to rot. That's the problem. And now, after watching this video, you get a general idea of what it takes to protect your car from rust, whether you're going to use products or just simple care to take care of it. If you're going to do it yourself or you're going to hire a professional, now you have a lot of information that will help you first understand why rust starts to begin with, and then what do these products do, and what is the best approach you're going to go about this, and all the information that we've shared in this video, which I hope was helpful, informative. I hope you learned something new. If you like it, consider giving it a thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber, consider subscribing to the channel. Check out some other videos. Until the next video, folks, may the Lord bless you and keep you, and you have yourself a wonderful day.